Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Another week is flying by. Are any of you going on your holiday soon? As always, remember, tweet or email me your vacation pics or where you listen to the show. Seeing as I spend a large part of my time speaking into your ears, I want you to be my eyes and live my life vicariously through you, which is in no way as sinister as it might sound. I just like seeing what you all get up to in your corner of the world. But hey, on to more serious matters, such as the true cost of hiring a new employee. Hiring the right people is notoriously difficult. Estimates put the true cost of recruiting the wrong employee anywhere between $250,000 to $850,000, especially when you factor in hiring, onboarding, compensation, severance, legal fees, etc. Not to mention that most tech companies are still dramatically uneven with 70% men. Now today I have a great story about how a 6-time founder and CircleCI CEO called Jim Rose is tackling these challenges using data-first evaluations and opening up about how they think about hiring differently. Over the course of the last 9 months, Jim has pushed to completely reshape the company's hiring process to weed out any of that unconscious bias, decrease turnover, improve diversity, and most importantly, make sure the right person for the job gets hired. I think it's a really interesting approach and the results are equally as fascinating. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to San Francisco so we can speak with Jim Rose, CEO of CircleCI. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yes. So my name is Jim Rose. I'm the CEO of a company called CircleCI. Well, what I do is a combination of cat herding plus recruiting. So we are a development tools company and a continuous delivery service. So we help other software development organizations automate their processes so that they can build and release their software faster.
Excellent. Now, CircleCI is the leading platform for software innovation at scale, or that's the reputation that it has out there in the digital marketplace. All with intelligent automation and delivery tools, CircleCI is used by more than 25,000 engineering organizations worldwide, including some huge names such as Facebook, Spotify, GoPro, Blue Apron, Bleacher Report, and Coinbase. And they all use it to radically reduce the time from idea to execution. But for anyone that is new to what you do, can you just help set the scene for listeners how in just a few short years you've become one of the largest build systems on the planet? It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been quite a wild ride. We basically fit right in between the time a developer makes a change in code until that change in code ends up being a running application in a data center. So if you imagine how the process works, a software developer makes a change in the code base, they commit it to their Git repo. Once we sense that that change has been added, we check the code out, we build it, we test it, we do whatever is necessary that's defined by the developer to make sure that that change is still valid and good. And after that change has been validated, everything is green, we can then automatically deploy it and update the application in the data center. And so between the GitHubs of the world, CircleCI, and something like AWS, you can have a fully automated development tool chain from soup to nuts. And when Circle started out, we really started out trying to automate the process for really early, fast-moving, venture-backed tech companies. So many of those companies on the list really started out as small 2, 3, 4-person shops that were trying to build software to test and validate an idea. And when Circle started, we really built a solution kind of tailor-made for that use case and tailor-made for those users who are busy trying to release fast and really understand if the thing that they're working on is actually a real business. So that was our initial target. As those companies picked up steam, as they figured out that, for example, cryptocurrency in the case of Coinbase is a really good idea and quite lucrative, they would then start to hire developers. And as they hired developers, they would write more code. As they'd write more code, they'd write more tests. As they write more tests, they would need to buy more from Circle. So we had a great opportunity to essentially partner with our customers as they continued to grow and needed to buy more power from us as a platform. The other big benefit is that developers have a tendency to move around. So there's opportunities that you work on projects for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and after a project is over, you have a tendency to go work on something else that's really interesting and new and is in need of a full tool chain. And our customers then take Circle to their next project and their next project and their next project. And so we've had a lot of success in really partnering with developers, trying to give them a great experience and then give them the opportunity to take that with them as they move on from company to company and project to project.
Now, you did mention GitHub there, so I suppose because it's hot in the news at the moment, I feel we must touch on that a little bit. I mean, have you heard about Microsoft buying GitHub for $7 billion, I believe? What's your take on that?
That's a good deal, right? It's a good deal for the folks at GitHub. $7.5 billion reasons to sell the company to Microsoft. I think, it's funny. I think there's at least some initial trepidation around GitHub being bought by Microsoft. I mean, GitHub being kind of having its heritage in the open source movement, having its heritage in a lot of different open source frameworks and communities. And so I think, on initial announcement or initial rumor on Friday, there was a little bit of trepidation in the market about what it possibly means, GitHub being bought by Microsoft. But I actually think that it's going to end up being an incredibly positive thing for the community. I think if you think back to Microsoft 20, 30 years ago, Microsoft was really built on the backbone of great developer support and great support for partners. And assuming that that is a big driver for this acquisition, I think it's going to be a really good opportunity for all of the folks inside of the GitHub ecosystem to really get to the next level alongside GitHub. And, certainly the other part of it is that there are now thousands of enterprise businesses who have relationships with Microsoft and have relationships with Microsoft partners who maybe didn't know about GitHub before today, and now all of a sudden have the opportunity to really kind of jump into a world where you get great modern tooling designed to support a whole bunch of different software-related and software-driven businesses. So it's still early. We'll see what the ultimate result will become, but I'm hopeful. I think it's going to end up being a really good thing for the market, and I think it's going to be a really positive thing for the community.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And one of the reasons I felt I had to ask you that question is because you're a 6-time founder yourself. So on your own personal journey, what are the biggest challenges that you've faced on that tech startup journey?
Well, it depends on which part of the journey.
Yeah.
Certainly when you get started, it's really about not just trying to figure out what idea it is that you're trying to work on and attempting to test, but the first part of the journey is all about trying to find product market fit. It's really about trying to find an idea and trying to find an opportunity where the market demands it and pulls it out of you as fast as you can build it. So for the first however many months or years of a customer's journey or of a company's journey, that's really what you're trying to figure out. You're trying to find that one product that fits that exact need in the market. And once your customers recognize that it's available, they essentially pull it out of the company and you can start to grow and go up the curve. And so that's really the first step. And, honestly, most companies never get there, right? You're usually working really hard, trying to find that exact product market fit, and you may never actually achieve it, and you end up doing something else. But once you do achieve product market fit, then the real challenge comes down to how do you scale the platform and how do you ensure that your technology is going to be able to support all of the users that are going to come and actually partake in the system. And that is its own special challenge, because usually in your pre-product market fit days, you're trying to cut a lot of corners. You're trying to move quickly. You're trying to find something that works in the market, but isn't necessarily architected for scale. Once you find product market fit, then it really comes down to continuing to run fast, and in most cases, run even faster to then try and make that idea scalable. And that gets to be really tricky. And then the last part of that is the only way that you can actually build a scalable technology is you need to hire a lot of people. And hiring is hard. And hiring is especially hard if you're a company that nobody knows about. You're a company with not a lot of track record. You may not have a lot of capital, but you have a lot of promise. And you have a lot of narrative and opportunity for people to get in early and help you build it as you go. And that really requires a lot of patience. It also requires a very particular type of person to kind of go on that journey with you.
I'm so glad you brought up the subject of hiring there, because that's something we often talk about on this show, and the value of acquiring the best tech talent. But one of the reasons I invited you on today was to discuss the opposite end of that scale, the cost of a bad hire. I mean, hiring the right people is really hard. Do you have any estimates on the cost of actually recruiting the wrong employee as opposed to the right one?
Yeah. Well, so when we think about a wrong employee, we typically think it costs at a minimum 3 times their first year's salary. So if you're going to pay someone $100,000, you should expect that the cost of the bad hire is going to be $300,000. And that cost only goes up. We've seen cost estimates as high as $800,000 and $900,000 for an employee. We're not quite on that level, but we do believe that it's quite expensive. And the thing that we have found around, bad hires is it really isn't that you end up with bad people. The hiring process is a great opportunity to get to know potential employees, to get to know potential partners. But the one thing that you really can't test for is fit. There are just times when you go through a very long hiring process and you think everything is going to work out, but as you get to work together, it may just not be the right fit. And, there's very few ways that you can really suss that out. And so it becomes very expensive.
Now, like I said a few moments ago, you are a 6-time founder and you're now CircleCI CEO. But can you tell me about your own personal experience in that area, and also what made you want to tackle these challenges using data-first evaluations and ultimately change the way people think about actually hiring?
Yeah, well, so I've done this a few times.
Yeah.
I've done sort of scaling startups at different phases, from small little 3-4 person startups and acquisitions all the way up to, several hundred employee multinational startups across multiple geographies. In the case of Circle right now, we have a kind of a bifurcated model where we are headquartered in California, and about 40 or 50% of our employees are based here in California. But the rest of our folks, because we have a follow the sun model where we have customers awake every hour of every day, we have a distributed workforce as well. So about the other half of our workforce is distributed across the world, across multiple countries, across multiple states here in the United States, across North America. And because we have a distributed workforce, and because a lot of our recruiting process doesn't happen face-to-face, and certainly a lot of our workday doesn't happen face-to-face, using data becomes a very, very critical component to making good hiring decisions. So we use data to not only help us formulate what we have found to be successful in Circle, in CircleCI, in terms of the type of work styles, in terms of the types of experience, in terms of the types of personalities. But the other part of that is we've used data as a way of really expanding our minds and expanding our potential funnel. There's a tendency, certainly in the tech world, there's a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion challenges around how do employees and how do potential employees and potential interested candidates break into companies, and specifically into Silicon Valley startups or other global startups. And we've tried to use data as a way of looking for the best candidates that will be successful inside of Circle, absent sort of any other conditions, any other defining characteristics. We really try and use our understanding of what makes a successful employee the sort of key barometer for our overall hiring process. And it's hard. and we're always trying to get better.
Now, it's also often said that if your company is not as diverse as your customers, then it will fail miserably at serving them, not to mention the value that diversity of thought brings to teams. So with that in mind, how do you avoid that unconscious bias and improve diversity? And most importantly, make sure the right person for the job gets hired?
Yeah, well, it actually starts well before you even recruit. So, one big effort that we make is just around trying to be active in the community. So we do a lot of sponsorships and events with different types of groups that are helping people understand, do they want a job in technology? So we work with organizations like Code 2040, which is really dedicated towards early college students and graduates and people of color. We work with Hackbright, which helps women enter into the technology workforce later in their career. And it's an opportunity for us just to basically give back and try and diversify the pool of candidates that are even just coming into the industry generally. So it starts well before we even recruit. Once you get into the recruiting part of the process, one area where I think a lot of companies get tripped up is the way that you write your job specs has a tendency to exclude a lot of potential candidates. And so, there are certain words, there are certain phrases, there are certain qualifications that you might put into a job requirement that for people on the outside, for women and people of color, will see as a hard and fast qualification and simply won't apply. And one of the ways that we avoid that is we take all of our various job specs and job requirements and we run them through a language decoder. We basically put them through a decoder that helps make the language gender neutral. It also helps us make our job requirements more inclusive. So it helps us remove requirements and qualifications that we probably don't even think are necessary, but just get included, that become very exclusive, and they essentially keep candidates from applying. So that's our first two steps. And then once somebody actually enters into the pipeline, we make sure that every employee that comes into Circle has a diverse interview panel. So we want as many different folks with different backgrounds, not just sexual, gender, and otherwise, but also educational backgrounds as well as socioeconomic backgrounds. We want as many folks interviewing these candidates from as many facets as possible to give us the best, most well-rounded approach and the best, most well-rounded feedback about candidates that have come and are trying to get a job here at Circle.
Can you tell me more about, I think when you put all this information through the decoder there and you passed out all that biased language, it actually encouraged more women to apply. I mean, that's fantastic on its own, that it proves that it works. I mean, can you tell me more about how you did that and the results?
Yeah, so there's all sorts of studies out there that basically say that given certain qualification language and given certain verbs, that those qualifications, when you're sitting from the position of a female applicant or from a person of color or other communities, they tend to see qualifications in a job requirement as hard and fast qualifications, and they will then choose simply not to apply. So if you say that 10 years of educational experience is an absolute must, someone sitting there with 9 years of experience simply won't apply. Whereas when you look at male candidates, they will just assume that that's a guideline and a suggestion and will continue to go through the application process. And so it's really important when you use these job linters and decoders is it helps you pull out some of these extraneous requirements. The other thing it does is it helps you pull out language that can also be seen as non-inclusive. So for example, you have, and it's a kind of a common trope in tech anymore around ninjas and rock stars and and owning the market and being super pumped. A lot of that is very, very male encoded, very aggressive language. And when you run it through the job linters, it basically allows you to morph that language and to make it less about being competitive and more about being complementary, cooperative, and supportive. And the good thing about that is that that is really the core of software engineering. Software engineering is a very cooperative communal experience. There was a story out when they were talking about the Google hiring process about, the beginning levels at Google are all about being software engineer 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And those early levels and those early days in your software engineering career are really about skills mastery. But as you move up as a software engineer, it really becomes more about teamwork and about architecture and trying to come up with the right decisions as a group. And you really want to be able to focus on those soft skills very early on in the recruiting process so that as people get more comfortable and they start to master the technical skills, you have those kind of ingrained social qualities that help them continue to advance their career.
Now, you guys also created an enhanced micro and macro skill-based test for every open position to essentially capture additional information during the interview process. Can you tell me more about that? I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, so we are very much an anti-whiteboard interview company. And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to come up with 2 different experiences for candidates as they go through the hiring process. The first one in this micro skills assessment is really about technical proficiency. So we give a kata that is essentially a piece of legacy code that we ask our potential employees and prospects to essentially refactor. And when they're in the process of refactoring, you're looking at things really from a pragmatic perspective. How do they think about abstraction? How do they think about trying to keep their overall code base dry? How do they think about testing and making sure that you have appropriate test coverage as they're going through the refactoring process? And so a lot of it is about looking at their core pragmatic software engineering skills, but it's also about really trying to get into and understand how do they think about approaching problems. And for our overall hiring process, for 1,000 engineers and 1,000 prospects that come in through the top of our hiring funnel, we only get about 117 that get through that initial hiring manager screen. And then only 44 of them will actually get through this micro skills evaluation. So knowing that they think about the way that they code in a similar way that we do, and that we believe that we want to move them to the next step. The macro skills assessment is really more about higher level questions around architecture and higher level questions about systems. So instead of thinking about code on a line by line level, thinking about concepts like abstraction, especially in a world where you have increased adoption of things like microservices, it becomes a really important exercise to understand, well, how do you think about how all of the various pieces of the system fit together? And depending on the level of the engineering applicant, the system gets more and more complex. And so that macro skills assessment is really working with those prospects and working with those candidates to start to think through, well, how would you think about architecting this system and how do all of these pieces work together and in concert? And through that process, it's really only a handful that make it through. And so that gives you a sense for how laborious and how much time you have to invest in the overall hiring process to get to, just a small handful of folks that you make offers to and hope to hire.
Absolutely. Now, you guys also raised, I think it was 31 million Series C funding and have grown the company to more than 130 employees that are located from all over the world since joining more than 3 years ago. But, how much of that success do you attribute to your approach to hiring? Do you think that plays a major part in that?
It definitely does. And so we're growing quite quickly. And so we have a lot of needs to continue to hire across the board, but especially on the software engineering side. And, it's really important, especially being in San Francisco. And from my window here in my office, I can see Google's office, Amazon's office, Facebook's office, Salesforce, and others. And, in a lot of those cases, in a lot of those companies, we are certainly never going to be the highest offer or the highest bid. So we have to create an environment, and we have to create opportunities for candidates that are about more than just the financial. They have to be interesting problems that candidates want to work on. They have to be environments there that are incredibly inclusive. It also means that we have to go out and find candidates that may slip through the cracks in a lot of these other employers. And so we are always trying to find the people that both fit within Circle, but also maybe someone else doesn't see, because those are great opportunities for us to continue to expand our base, but also just sort of broaden our minds and broaden the overall experience of the team here at Circle.
So what's next for Circle there? Is there anything else that you can share with us today about what your plans are for the future?
Well, we're just continuing to really focus on executing and growth. The big change that we see coming in the overall software development lifecycle is that more and more companies have been putting in more and more systems, and those systems have really generated a lot of data. But in generating a lot of data, there's not necessarily a lot of intelligence coming out. So we have more and more information coming out of the systems without a lot of understanding. And so what we're working on at Circle is we're really trying to find and harness all of that shared data that's coming out of the projects that build on Circle and look for patterns. So look for patterns that tell a potential manager, what does an effective, fast-moving software organization look like? How often does it deploy? How stable is their overall code base? How secure is it? And these are all metrics that most teams know in their heart of hearts that they want to understand and they want to be able to strive towards, but there aren't a lot of benchmarks out there. So we're really working hard to take a lot of this shared understanding and give folks some idea of what best in breed actually looks like.
Fantastic. Well, before I do let you go, could I just ask that you also remind the listeners of where they can find you online, or maybe even contact a member of your team if they've got any questions on the number of topics that we've raised in today's conversation?
Absolutely. So you can find us at CircleCI.com, and you can sign up using your GitHub account, your Bitbucket account, or your Google account and just get started with the product. It's free for open source projects. It's also free for small private projects. So there's no barrier to getting started with Circle. If you have questions, feel free to send us an email at sayhi@circleci.com, and I'm sure we'll grab it as soon as we can.
Fantastic. Well, a huge thank you for coming on and talking with me today. I love everything that you're doing here and the whole ethos of the company and that progressive attitude. And it really does, especially because the tech industry has got a bit of a bad rap for not being inclusive and not being diverse. And you guys are going out your way to prove it doesn't have to be like that. So thanks so much for taking the time to come and speak with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I think it's fascinating how the managers at CircleCI started this approach by running their job descriptions all through tools like Agenda Decoder and JobLint to parse out biased language, which then instantly encouraged more women to apply. I mean, we don't think about just how much the language that we use in writing or job adverts and how much that impacts the world around us. And I agree with Jim that hiring the right person creates sustainable long-term value that outweighs any costs involved every time. But hey, what do you think? This is the $1 million question, and I'm waiting for your opinions right here. But I am afraid I don't have $1 million for you. Slight technicality there. But as always, email me techblogwriter@outlook.com or tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. But that's it for today. But remember to keep those emails and tweets coming in. And a big thank you for listening. But until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.